The room smelled of metal and fear. The girl's hands trembled as she clutched the iron bars of her cage, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Chains rattled with every movement, reminding her that escape was only a dream. She was the last one left, the final prize in a cruel game. Voices echoed down the corridor, alien traders laughing, their heavy boots clanging on the steel floor. She knew what was coming. She had seen the others taken before her, one by one. They vanished into the darkness, never to return. Now it was her turn. Her breath came in short gasps. Her heart pounded like a war drum. She whispered to herself, in her own language, prayers to ancestors who could no longer hear. Her people had fallen long ago. Their ships burned, their cities erased. She was nothing but a captured relic, a body to be used. The guards stopped outside her cell. Two massive reptilian creatures with scales that glistened in the flickering light. Their yellow eyes stared at her with hunger, not for food, but for the cruel ritual to come. One guard banged his spear against the bars, making her flinch. "Soon," he hissed, his voice low and mocking. Her knees weakened, but she forced herself to stand tall. She would not cry. She would not beg. If she had to fall, she would fall, with the last shred of pride left in her. The sound of a bell rang through the hall, signaling the start of the gathering. Her cell door screeched open and the guards pulled her forward, chains dragging across the floor like snakes. She stumbled but didn't fall, refusing to give them the satisfaction. The corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with harsh lights and rows of waiting figures. It was not just an auction, it was a display of power. Wealthy buyers, cloaked in shadows, sat in raised seats like predators watching prey. On the stage ahead, cages were lined up, each once holding a victim. Now, only her cage remained, and she was the last performance. The announcer, a thin alien with a voice like broken glass, raised his arms. "Behold the final prize," he shouted, his words echoing off the walls. The crowd leaned forward, murmuring with excitement. Her chains clinked as she was forced onto the platform, her body trembling though she fought to appear strong. The announcer grinned cruelly. "Tonight she is offered not as a servant, not as a slave, but for breeding rights, the rarest of all." The chamber roared with approval, the sound washing over her like a storm. Her mind screamed, but her mouth remained silent, her lips pressed into a thin line of defiance. As the bidding began, she closed her eyes. Perhaps this would be the end. Perhaps her story would end in this cursed place. But in the distance, she heard a sound no one else noticed. Boots, but not like the trader's boots. Heavier, slower, and purposeful. The crowd continued shouting numbers, but her eyes snapped. Open at the far entrance, a shadow stood against the light. Tall, broad-shouldered, and different. A human. No one had noticed him yet, but she did. And in that instant, for the first time in years, she felt something spark in her chest. Not fear, not despair, but hope. The hall was alive with voices. Alien tongues mixed together in a storm of sound, harsh and greedy. The girl stood on the raised platform, chains heavy on her wrists, her glowing silver skin making her look like both a treasure and a prisoner at the same time. She tried to keep her eyes down, to hide the trembling in her chest, but every heartbeat echoed like thunder in her ears. The announcer lifted a hand, his long fingers sharp as blades. "Tonight you see what few ever see," he called out, his voice rising above the chaos. "This is no ordinary captive. This is the last of her kind, a fertile prize, untouched and rare, a perfect vessel for breeding." The words burned in her ears and shame coiled inside her chest. The crowd leaned forward, eyes gleaming, whispers like daggers cutting into her. From the shadows, bidders raised their hands, their voices cold and firm as they shouted numbers. The prices climbed higher, the roar of the chamber louder. Each number spoken felt like another chain wrapping around her, pulling her down into the abyss. The reptilian guards smiled cruelly, pleased with the excitement. For them, this was not horror. It was profit. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She remembered her mother's voice, soft and strong. "Even in chains, you are still yourself." But how much of herself remained now, standing here like an object, a living trophy? The announcer spread his arms wide. Do you not see? This is more than flesh, this is legacy. Whoever claims her bloodline, her children will be heirs of power, hybrids strong enough to bend worlds. The crowd erupted again, their hunger growing. Every cheer made her want to disappear, to vanish into the shadows where no one could see her. But then, in the back of the hall, a single sound cut through the chaos, a voice clear and calm. I will bid. The noise died for a moment. Heads turned, and the shadow she had seen before stepped forward. He was human. There was no doubt. His build, his face, his eyes all spoke of Earth. His presence was strange. Here, strange and dangerous, humans rarely came to such places, and when they did, they never walked in alone. The announcer blinked, his sharp smile faltering for a second. And who dares place such a bid? He asked, suspicion in his tone. The human did not answer. He simply raised a small device in his hand, flashing credits on its display. The number was high, higher than any so far. The crowd gasped, some muttered in anger, others in disbelief. The girl's breath caught, her eyes fixed on him. Why would a human bid for her? Was this another kind of cruelty, another mask of the same horror? Or was it something else? The announcer laughed suddenly, forcing the tension away with his voice. A brave soul, but perhaps a foolish one. Can a lone human truly afford what stands before him? He gestured. To the crowd. Do not let this prize slip away. Outbid him, show your worth. The chamber roared again, bids climbing higher and higher, but each time, the human calmly raised the display, matching them, beating them, never hesitating. The girl felt her knees weaken. Every time his voice cut through the noise, she felt a thread pulling her closer to life, closer to hope. She could not understand it, but she wanted to believe. The bidders grew restless, their voices sharper, their faces darker. They were not used to being challenged, especially not by a human. Some spat insults, some threatened violence, but the man stood calm, unshaken. His eyes never left the stage, never left her. Finally, the announcer raised his hands again. Enough, he said, his tone both angry and amused. The human bids. The highest, unless another dares to rise, the girl is his. He paused, letting the silence drag, but no one spoke. No one dared. The hammer came down, metal striking metal. The sound like a final judgment. Sold, the announcer declared, his voice echoing. The girl's heart leapt, though fear still gnawed at her. Sold, but to whom? And for what purpose? The human stepped forward as the guards dragged her off. The platform, chains scraping the ground. For the first time she saw his face clearly. His eyes were not cruel, not hungry like the others. They were steady, filled with something she had not seen in years. Compassion. The guard shoved her into his direction, laughing as if mocking both of them. She is yours, human, one growled. May your madness be worth the price. The human said nothing. He only placed a steady hand on her shoulder, and in that touch, gentle and firm, she felt something break inside her. Not in pain, but in release. The chains still bound her body, but for the first time, her spirit stirred. The crowd muttered, watching closely, waiting for what would happen. Next, some were angry, some amused, but all were curious. What would a human do with such a prize? Would he claim her like the rest, or would he defy them all? The announcer narrowed his eyes. You may have bought her, but in this place ownership means nothing unless you prove it. The guards drew closer, their weapons gleaming. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for the next scene. The girl's pulse raced. This was no rescue, not yet. This was only the beginning of another storm. And she stood in the middle, chained, trembling, yet holding on to the thin spark of hope lit by one human. The air inside the chamber grew heavy. The human stood tall at the center, his shadow stretching long under the harsh lights. Every alien eye followed him. Whispers slithering through the crowd like smoke. It was not common to see a human in such a place, and even less common for one to challenge the powerful bidders. The girl stared at him, her breath caught between fear and fragile hope. His hand still rested lightly on her shoulder, steady but not forceful. It was a strange touch in this place of cruelty, where hands usually struck, pushed, or dragged. His calm presence was almost unnatural. The announcer's grin returned, sharp and mocking. "So a human dares walk into my hall and steal a prize meant for kings," he said, his voice cutting like glass. "You pay your credits. You think it makes you strong, but here strength is proven, not bought." He gestured, and the reptilian guard stepped forward, spears gleaming, scales rattling. The human did not move. His eyes scanned the room once, steady and cold, then returned to the girl. "Stand behind me," he said softly, his voice low but firm. She froze, not sure if she should obey, yet something in his tone pushed her legs to move. She stepped half a pace behind him, her chains clinking. The announcer raised a hand, and the guards lunged forward, their heavy bodies moving fast. The crowd roared, eager for blood, but the human was faster. With one sudden motion, he reached into his coat and pulled free a weapon unlike any they had seen. It was small, sleek, and human-made, a plasma pistol humming with restrained power. The first guard thrust his spear, but the human sidestepped. A flash of blue light burst from the pistol, striking the spear's shaft. It shattered in sparks, the weapon falling in useless pieces. The second guard snarled, swinging his clawed hand, but the human's arm shot forward, pressing the pistol to the guard's chest. A pulse of energy sent the massive creature crashing back into the wall, smoke rising from the burn. The crowd gasped, voices erupting, some in anger, some in fear. Humans were known for technology, yes, but few expected one to stand fearless in the middle of a den of predators. The announcer's smile faltered, his fingers twitching nervously, but his pride forced him to speak. "You dare draw weapons in my hall, human? You have just signed your death." The human raised the pistol, his voice calm. "No, I bought her, she's mine, and anyone who tries to touch her will answer to me." The words were simple, but the way he spoke them froze the room. It wasn't a threat screamed with rage. It was a promise spoken with iron. The girl's knees trembled. No one had ever spoken for her like that, not since her people were destroyed. She stared at the human's back, his stance unshaken against a hall filled with enemies. Her chest tightened, a strange warmth fighting against her years of fear. The announcer hissed, trying to regain control. "You think you can walk out with her, human? This is not your world, this is ours. The buyers will never allow it." He turned to the crowd, raising his arms. "Will you let an off-worlder mock our traditions? Will you let him steal what is rightfully ours?" The chamber shook with shouts, anger boiling, dozens of voices calling for the human's blood. The human did not flinch. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button and a projection lit the air above him. It was a signal beacon, flashing red with the mark of the Terran Alliance, a military code known across the stars. The crowd fell into uneasy silence. Everyone knew the meaning of that signal. Where there was one Terran, there could be more, and Terrans were not to be provoked lightly. Stories of human fleets, of battles won against impossible odds, lingered in the minds of many. The announcer clenched his jaw, his sharp smile gone. "You bluff," he spat, though his voice wavered. The human's eyes narrowed. "Try me," he replied. The silence stretched long, broken only by the hum of the weapon in his hand. The girl felt her chains shaking against her body, her heart pounding as the reality unfolded. This human was not here to blend in, not here to trade like the others. He had come for something else, something dangerous. Finally, the announcer snapped his fingers. The guards stepped back, growling but obedient. The crowd hissed, some in anger, some in frustration, but no one moved forward. No one dared challenge the Terran threat. The human lowered the pistol slightly but kept it ready. He leaned closer to the girl, his voice low. "We're leaving," he said. Her eyes widened, disbelief flooding her chest. Leave? Was it truly possible? She looked at the locked gates, the guards, the endless eyes watching. Yet when he said the words, she believed them. The announcer snarled from the stage, "You may take her, but you will not leave this world alive, human. The moment you step outside, hunters will be waiting. You have made enemies you cannot fight. The human met his glare without fear. Let them try, he said. His hand tightened gently on the girl's arm, pulling her closer as he guided her toward the exit. The crowd parted reluctantly, some spitting curses, some whispering threats, but none dared to stop him. The girl stumbled as she walked, her chains dragging, her body trembling. Yet for the first time since her capture, her steps carried more than despair. They carried hope, faint and fragile but alive. At the edge of the hall, the gates loomed high and locked. The human raised his pistol, fired once, and the locks exploded in sparks. The doors swung open, revealing the dark city beyond. The crowd roared in fury, but it was too late. The human stepped into the shadows with the alien girl at his side, and the storm truly began. The night air outside the chamber was thick and hot. The human pushed the doors wide and stepped into the open, dragging the alien girl gently by her arm. The streets were alive with neon lights and shadows, narrow alleys twisting like serpents between towering buildings. Strange signs glowed in alien symbols, and the smell of oil, smoke, and decay filled the air. Behind them, the auction hall erupted in noise, the crowd screaming with rage, guards bellowing orders. The announcer's voice rose above them all, his words sharp and furious. Do not let them escape. Seal the streets. The human dies. Tonight, the sound of alarms howled across the city, red lights flashing along the walls like angry eyes. The girl's chains rattled as she stumbled forward, her bare feet slipping on the wet stone road. She tried to keep up, but fear made her legs weak. The human slowed his pace just enough to steady her, his hand firm on her wrist. Stay close, he whispered, his voice calm even as chaos rumbled behind them. The first wave of hunters appeared from the shadows, their reptilian bodies glistening under the neon light, weapons raised, eyes burning with fury. The human raised his pistol, firing sharp bursts. Of blue light, one hunter fell with a scream. Another dropped his blade as the shot burned his arm. But more poured in from the alleys, snarling, blocking their path. The girl gasped, panic clawing at her chest. There are too many, she whispered, her voice breaking. The human glanced at her, his eyes steady. There are always too many, but that doesn't matter, he said. His calm words felt impossible, but they anchored her like a rock in the middle of a storm. He pulled a small sphere from his belt, pressed a button and threw it to the ground. It burst in a flash of light and smoke, a blinding haze filling the street. The hunters coughed and stumbled, their eyes burning. Move, the human ordered, guiding her into a side alley, their footsteps echoing as they slipped into the darkness. The alley twisted like a maze, walls covered in strange graffiti, doors sealed tight. The girl stumbled again, chains cutting her wrists. Please, I can't, she whispered, her voice trembling. The human stopped, turned, and without a word, raised his pistol, firing at the shackles. The locks sparked and shattered, the chains falling to the ground with a heavy clang. She stared at her free wrists in shock. You freed me, she whispered. The human gave a small nod. You'll run faster without them, he said. His voice was flat, but there was warmth beneath it. For the first time in years, she felt air on her skin without the weight of chains. They ran deeper into the city, the sounds of pursuit echoing closer. Hunters shouted in alien tongues, their boots pounding on the streets, weapons clashing. Every corner they turned, new shadows moved, blocking their escape. The human fired again, and again, his shots precise, his movements efficient, but the hunters were endless. At last, the alley opened into a wider street, crowded with markets and glowing stalls. Merchants and thieves froze as they saw the armed human dragging the glowing-skinned alien girl. Gasps filled the air, and then the crowd parted in fear as the hunters arrived behind them. The human raised his weapon high, firing into the sky, the plasma bolt exploding in a shower of sparks. The crowd scattered in terror, the market thrown into chaos. He pulled her into the confusion, weaving through panicked bodies, disappearing into the mess of lights and shadows. The girl clung to him, her heart racing. Everywhere she looked, she saw faces twisted with anger, weapons raised, voices shouting. But she also saw him, unshaken, guiding her with every step. It was madness, she thought, to fight so many alone. And yet he did for her. At the edge of the market, they ducked behind a collapsed building, hiding in the ruins. The girl pressed her back to the wall, her breath ragged. The human crouched low, checking the charge on his pistol, his expression calm but focused. "They won't stop," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "They'll hunt us forever. No one escapes them." The human looked at her, his eyes steady. "Then we keep running until forever ends," he said. She stared at him, stunned by the simplicity of his words. In her world, no one spoke like that. No one believed in such impossible defiance. The sound of boots grew louder, hunters sweeping the streets searching. The human reached into his coat again, pulling out a small device with blinking lights. He pressed a code, and the device emitted a faint signal. "What is that?" she whispered. "A call," he said. "To who?" "To anyone listening," he replied. She didn't understand, but she wanted to believe. The hunters' shadows stretched across the rubble as they drew closer, their voices snarling in the night. The human stood, pistol raised, his body tense. The girl's heart hammered as she pressed herself against the wall. Her freedom had only just begun, and it might end in blood within moments. But as the hunters closed in, the human smiled faintly. "Hope is louder than fear," he said. Then the street exploded with light as the signal was answered. The night city came alive with alarms. Red lights flashed across rooftops, sirens wailed through the streets, and the hunters' voices grew louder. The human pulled the alien girl by the hand. Weaving through the narrow alleys, his steps quick but steady. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her legs aching, but she forced herself to keep pace, fear burning through her veins like fire. The signal beacon he had activated still blinked faintly in his pocket, but no rescue had arrived yet. They were alone in a city that wanted them dead. Above, drones buzzed like angry insects, scanning the streets with beams of harsh white light. One beam swept across the alley where they ran, and the girl froze in terror. The human yanked her forward, his voice low but sharp. "Don't stop. Keep moving." They burst into a wider street, their shadows stretching long under the neon signs. Vendors abandoned their stalls as hunters appeared, snarling and swinging their weapons. The human fired without hesitation, blue bolts cutting through the air, striking walls and scattering enemies. Explosions rocked the road, smoke rising in, thick plumes. "Left," he ordered, and they ducked into another path, vanishing before the hunters could regroup. The girl's chest burned, her body trembling from exhaustion. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered as they ran, her voice almost lost in the chaos. The human's eyes flicked toward her for only a moment. "Because no one else would," he replied. Those words struck her harder than the chains ever had, simple yet impossible. He owed her nothing, and yet here he was, risking everything. The alleys twisted endlessly, and every turn brought danger. From one corner, a massive hunter leapt out, swinging a heavy blade. The girl screamed, but the human spun, firing at the hunter's chest, sending him crashing backward into the wall. Another group appeared from behind, their boots pounding on the wet ground. The human grabbed a crate, shoved it over, and sent debris tumbling into the alley. Slowing them just enough, they climbed a broken stairwell, the steps shaking under their weight. At the top, they crossed a narrow bridge of metal pipes stretched between two ruined towers. The girl clutched his arm, her eyes wide as she looked down at the endless drop below. Her feet slipped, and she nearly fell. But his hand caught her waist and pulled her back. "Don't look down," he said firmly. She nodded quickly, forcing her legs to keep moving. When they reached the other side, hunters were already waiting, their weapons glowing. The human cursed under his breath, raising his pistol. "Stay behind me," he said again, his tone like stone. Shots exploded in the air, sparks flying as plasma bolts tore across the rooftop. The girl ducked low, her heart hammering, but she could not look away from him. Every move he made was precise, controlled, fearless. It was as if he had fought like this 100 times before. One hunter charged, but the human sidestepped and fired point blank. Another tried to flank them, but the girl, acting on instinct, grabbed a loose pipe and swung it, striking the alien across the face. He stumbled back in shock, and the human finished him with a quick shot. She froze, staring at the pipe in her hands. For the first time, she had fought back, even if only for a moment. The human glanced at her, a faint smile flickering across his lips. "Good," he said simply, then turned back to the fight. They escaped again, slipping into the skeleton of an unfinished building, its walls broken, its floors scattered with rubble. The hunters' voices echoed inside, growing closer. The girl leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. "We can't keep running," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "They'll catch us. They always catch us." The human knelt in front of her, his pistol still in hand, his eyes steady. "They haven't caught us yet," he said. His words were calm, but his eyes burned with something fierce, something unbreakable. A crash shook the floor as hunters forced their way in, breaking through the outer walls. The human grabbed her hand and pulled her up again. "This way," he said, leading her deeper into the ruins. They climbed higher, their footsteps echoing, dust falling from the cracked ceilings. Hunters followed close behind, their roars filling the air. At the top floor, the human kicked open a door, and they spilled out onto the rooftop. The city stretched wide below them, a sea of neon and shadows. The girl stumbled to the edge, her eyes wide with fear. "There's nowhere left," she whispered. The human looked out across the skyline, his jaw tight. "There's always somewhere," he said. He pulled out the beacon again, its red light flashing brighter now. For a moment, nothing happened, only the sound of hunters climbing behind them. Then the sky split with light. A ship, sleek and dark, roared into view above the rooftops, its engines glowing. The hunters froze in shock, their snarls turning to shouts of alarm. The girl gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Someone answered," she whispered. The human gave a faint smile, his pistol still aimed at the stairwell. "They always do," he said. The hunters burst onto the rooftop, but the ship lowered closer, its hatch opening. "Go," the human ordered, pushing her toward it. She stumbled forward, her heart racing, hope crashing over her like a wave. But behind them, the hunters raised their weapons for one final strike. The chase was not over yet. The storm was still coming. The roar of the ship's engines faded into silence. Hours had passed since the rooftop escape, and now the human and the alien girl hid inside a forgotten shelter deep below the city, the cow. Place smelled of dust and rust. Old walls cracked, wires hanging loose like vines. It was no palace, but it was quiet, and for the first time no footsteps of hunters echoed close behind. The girl sat in the corner, hugging her knees to her chest, her silver skin faintly glowing in the dim light. Her eyes darted around nervously, expecting the door to burst open at any moment, but it didn't. The only sound was the hum of the human's weapon as he checked its charge, and the faint crackle of a broken light above. She finally whispered, her voice shaking. "Why? Why did you save me?" The human glanced at her, his expression unreadable. He slid the weapon back into its holster and sat down across from her, his back resting against the wall. "Because no one else would," he said simply. "You were about to lose everything, and I couldn't let that happen." Her lips trembled, her eyes filling with tears. "No one ever stopped them before," she whispered. "They took my people. They took my family. They took everything." Her voice broke and she buried her face in her arms. The human stayed silent for a long moment, his eyes watching her. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady. "They can take your chains, your freedom, your home, but they can't take who you are, unless you let them." She lifted, her head slowly, her glowing eyes meeting his. For a long moment, neither spoke. In his gaze she saw something she had forgotten, something almost impossible to believe in. Kindness. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small ration bar, handing it to her. Her hands shook as she took it, her body hungry but her mind unsure. "Eat," he said. She hesitated, then bit into it, the dry taste filling her mouth. Tears slid down her cheeks as she chewed, not because of the food, but because it was the first time in years anyone had offered her something without wanting something back. The human leaned his head against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. "You'll be safe here for a while," he said. "But not forever. They'll be searching." Her voice wavered. "They'll never stop. You should leave me. You'll die because of me." His eyes opened, sharp and steady. "I don't leave people behind," he said. The words hit her like a storm. Her chest tightened, her tears falling freely now. No one had ever said that to her, not since her world fell. Everyone else had abandoned her, sold her, chained her. But this human, this stranger, chose to stay. She whispered, almost too soft to hear, "You don't even know me." The human gave a faint smile. "I don't need to. I know enough." "Enough?" she asked, confused. "That you didn't deserve what they tried to do to you," he said. "That's all I need to know." Silence filled the shelter again, but it was no longer heavy. It was softer, almost peaceful. For the first time, she felt her shoulders relax, even if only a little. Her heartbeat slowed, the fear inside her chest loosening its grip. She wasn't safe. Not yet. But she wasn't alone anymore. Later, as the broken light flickered above, she whispered, "What is your name?" The human hesitated, then answered, "Elias." She repeated it softly, like testing the sound. Elias. It felt strange on her tongue, but comforting too. "And you?" he asked gently. She lowered her head, her voice trembling. "They called me property. They called me nothing." His voice firmed. "That's not your name." Her lips shook, and after a long pause she whispered, "Lyra." Elias nodded, his voice softer now. "Lyra, you're not nothing. Not anymore." Her eyes glistened, her body trembling as her heart clung to the words. It had been so long since she had heard her true name spoken with respect. She curled closer to the wall, her body exhausted, her eyelids heavy. But before sleep claimed her, she whispered again, "Elias." He looked at her. "Thank you," she said, her voice fragile but real. Then her eyes closed, and for the first time in years, she slept without nightmares. Elias sat quietly, watching the broken door, his hand resting near his weapon. He didn't sleep, his eyes sharp and alert. He knew the hunters were still searching, and they would not stop until they found them. But for now, the girl was safe, and that was enough. He leaned back against the wall, the faintest trace of a smile touching his lips. Trust had been born in this broken place, fragile but real, and it was only the beginning. The shelter did not stay quiet for long. Lyra awoke to the sound of boots echoing in the tunnels, heavy and countless. Her silver eyes snapped open, her heart leaping into her throat. Elias was already on his feet, weapon in hand, his body tense but calm. "They found us," she whispered, her voice shaking. Elias gave a sharp nod, his jaw tightening. "We knew they would," he said. Lyra's hands trembled as fear gripped her chest again. "We can't fight them all," she said, tears threatening to rise. But Elias's voice was steady, unbroken. "We don't need to fight them all, we just need to make a choice." The door shook as claws and blades slammed against it, sparks flying with each strike. Lyra stumbled to her feet, her body weak from exhaustion but driven by panic. "What choice?" she asked, her voice breaking. Elias turned, his eyes locking on hers. "You choose to run, and I'll hold them off. Or you stay, and we fight together." Her chest tightened, the thought of leaving him burning her heart. For so long she had been forced to obey, to be silent, to survive only as property. But now he was giving her something no one had given her before, a choice. The door cracked, metal screeching, hunters snarling from the other side. Lyra shook, her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I can't leave you," she whispered, Elias's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then stand with me," he said. The door burst open with a deafening crash, hunters pouring in like a flood, their eyes burning with fury. Elias raised his pistol, blue light flashing as he fired again and again. The first hunters fell, but more pushed through. Snarling and swinging their weapons, Lyra grabbed a broken pipe from the ground, her body trembling but her grip firm. She would not hide, not anymore. They fought side by side, Elias's shots precise and deadly, Lyra striking with desperate strength. Every swing of her pipe was fueled not by skill but by years of pain, anger, and fear. For the first time in her life, she was not a victim, she was fighting for herself. But the hunters were endless, their numbers too great. Elias's pistol sparked, the charge running low. He cursed under his breath, pulling Lyra back as the wave of enemies closed in. The tunnel shook with their roars, the walls echoing with chaos. Lyra's heart pounded, her breath ragged. "We can't win," she gasped. Elias's eyes burned with determination. "Winning isn't the point," he said. "Living free, even for a moment, is worth everything." Those words struck her soul. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not just a man but a flame, a fire that refused to bow to darkness, and in that moment she understood. The hunters surged forward, but before they could strike, the ground above rumbled. A beam of white light cut through the ceiling. Burning the stone away, Lyra shielded her eyes, her heart racing. Elias looked up, a faint smile breaking through his grim expression. "They answered," he said. From above, a Terran dropship descended, its engines shaking the tunnels. Armored soldiers leapt down, their weapons blazing. The hunters howled in rage as bolts of plasma tore through their ranks, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Elias pulled Lyra close, shielding her as the chaos unfolded. The Terran soldiers advanced, their precision cutting down wave after wave. Within minutes, the hunters broke, fleeing back into the shadows, their snarls fading into the distance. Silence fell, broken only by the hum of the dropship. Lyra's body trembled, her chest heaving with every breath. She looked around, her eyes wide, her mind struggling to accept what had just happened. They were alive. A soldier approached Elias, saluting sharply. "Sir, we got your signal," he said. Elias nodded, his voice calm. "Good timing." The soldier's gaze shifted to Lyra, his eyes curious but respectful. "What about her?" he asked. Elias's eyes softened as he looked at Lyra. "She's free," he said firmly. Lyra's breath caught, her throat tightening. Free. The word felt unreal, heavy and light all at once. Her chains were gone, her captors defeated, her life her own again. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "I never thought I'd hear that word again." Elias stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You have a choice now, Lyra," he said. "You can go anywhere, live however you want, no one decides for you anymore." She stared at him, her heart pounding. For years, choices had been stolen from her, every step forced, every breath controlled. And now here was a man offering her the one thing she had dreamed of, but never dared believe possible: freedom. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I choose to live." Elias smiled, the faintest warmth in his tired eyes. "Then let's make sure you do," he said. The soldiers guided them into the dropship, the hatch closing behind them. As the engines roared and the ship lifted into the sky, Lyra looked out through the small window. The city of chains shrank below, its neon lights fading into the darkness. For the first time in years, she felt the weight lift from her chest. She turned back to Elias, her voice soft but filled with something new. "Why did you risk so much for me?" she asked. Elias's gaze held hers, steady and calm. "Because sometimes," he said, "saving one life is worth more than saving 1,000. Lyra's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not only from sorrow. They were from something else, something brighter. Hope. The dropship soared higher, leaving the cursed city behind. And Lyra knew her story was no longer about chains. It was about choice, freedom, and the human who had given her both.